All right, Geoffrey Chaucer. He is often cited as the father of English poetry. Sometimes he's given credit as the father of the English language or English literature. He was not the first to write in English, but he is credited with popularizing the vernacular. So at the time that he was writing, Latin was the language of the church. French was spoken by the English nobility. And French is a descendant of Latin. So Latin, they're called Romance languages, as in Roman. So the 5 Romance languages are Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. So they all have a similar Latin-based vocabulary. Anyway, Chaucer does not choose to write in the language of the church or the nobility. He chooses the vernacular, which is the language of the common people. And this is an early form of English called Middle English. Middle English would be recognizable to us, but it has some different rules and different pronunciations, unlike Old English, which is really almost impossible for the modern English speaker to understand. One place where you can really see the French influence is when you are talking about some of the animals that you would encounter even now, but in the Middle Ages. The animals, when they are alive and in the field, have their Anglo-Saxon names, and the animals, when they are on the plate, ready to be eaten, have French names. And we could infer from this information that when it was time to, tend the animals and work to maintain the animals, that was the job of the Anglo-Saxon peasants. But when it was time to eat the animals at a delicious buffet, that was the job of the upper class, the Norman French. So, for example, in the field, it's a cow, but on the plate, it is beef. In the field, it's deer, but on the plate, it's venison. In the field, it's pig, but on the plate, it's pork. In the field, it's chicken, but on the plate, it's poultry. And same with sheep and mutton. So the video that I had researched earlier in the summer had the idea of a Norman French date night where the Anglo-Saxon and a Norman were on a date and they had different words. Anyway, that's what that's about. I can't remember why the lecturer in the video that I originally researched said that he thought English was the richest and most expressive in the world today, but I do think English is very rich and expressive. I do remember, too, he compared word count, like how many words are in the English vocabulary, and he used the Oxford English Dictionary, and I want to say it was something like 600,000 words, which I don't think it was the most in the world, but it is really a huge vocabulary in comparison to French or Spanish or even the Latin. So that was one of the things that Chaucer had to his advantage, and he was masterful. He chose this wonderful vocabulary in his Canterbury Tales and in his work. So what exactly is the setting for Canterbury Tales? It's taking place in London amongst a group of pilgrims. They are going on a pilgrimage from one end of town to the other to visit the site of St. Thomas a Becket. Thomas Becket was an English archbishop and a martyr. This would have been about 150 years or so before Chaucer, so like the 1100s. And he was famously murdered by the king, Henry II, at Canterbury Cathedral. So they had a conflict. I can't remember the nature of the conflict, but at some point, Henry, the king, says something to his knights, something along the lines of, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest," which those knights took to mean, oh, the king would like us to go and kill this guy. So they take off to Canterbury Cathedral, and Thomas a Becket is in the front of the church, and they stab him and he dies. So he is a martyr for the faith because he's standing up to the king for the power of the church. And this sort of cult grew up around him. And, a pilgrimage, you go and visit the holy site. This might make your prayers more powerful. This might bring you some sort of favor with God. And of course, it's, maybe a little vacation. So people that have a little money to spend, they're going to book like a package tour and go on this tour across to get to Canterbury Cathedral and check out the sights. So this story of the pilgrimage is the framing device or the frame story for the collection of stories that the pilgrims are going to tell. There's 30 pilgrims who take the journey. They start off at the Tabard Inn, and they're going to cross the Thames and get to Canterbury. They agree they're going to have this storytelling contest as they travel. And so the host serves as like an MC for this contest. And most of the pilgrims are introduced in the general prologue. So we're going to meet each character, learn kind of what estate they represent or what guild they're a part of. And then after the prologue, they're going to tell their tales. Sometimes there's like scenes in between the tales where they sort of argue about the story, like so-and-so tells a story that makes another pilgrim look bad, and so they answer each other back and forth. Sometimes the answer is told in yet another story. Chaucer seemed to have had a plan that there was going to be 2 stories on the way to Canterbury and then 2 stories on the way back, which would have been a lot of stories. But he died before he could finish. So some of the pilgrims do not tell stories at all. I think we have 24 stories. We aren't going to read all of them. So the use of the pilgrimage as the framing device lets Chaucer bring together people from all these walks of life. There's a knight, there's a prioress, which is a kind of nun. There's a monk, merchant, a lawyer, a scholar, lots of others. So this lets us present a varied collection of genres. A genre is a type of a story. So see if you can find the courtly romance, because we have learned about that particular genre. There's also an allegory. There's a sermon. So there's a mixture of genres. We'll talk a little more about genre probably.